Well, in Lab 17 and 18, the brain lab. Brain is a big topic, a lot of memorization. So we divide the structure into 2 labs. And this also helps you your Lab 19, the brain dissection, the sheep brain dissection. So the brains have the fissure, sulcus, gyrus. So we talk about this structure in the lab. I take this picture from the PowerPoint to here. So your brain have the wrinkles, so they're moving in, moving out. The moving in is called the sulcus, like this one is called the central sulcus. Separate your frontal lobe away from your parietal lobe. And the moving out is called the gyrus. So you have the precentral gyrus, and that's where your motor cortex is located. Postcentral gyrus, that's your somatosensory cortex is located. And if they move in a lot, it's called the fissure, like the longitudinal fissure. That's the one separate your left and right hemisphere. And these are the inside structure. Your brain divides into different lobes. So they share the same name with the bones. So they have different lobes. Let's look at the inside. Inside in this area called the basal nuclei. So basal nuclei is associated with Parkinson's disease. Like these neurons, they use dopamine as neurotransmitter. So if I point at this area, you don't have to tell me this is what part of the basal ganglia. So it's part of basal ganglia. It's okay to call all this basal ganglia. This area, corpus callosum, this is all white. So this is the axon myelinated structure. Its function is like the highway connect the left brain and right brain together. So that's the corpus callosum. And let's look at the sagittal section. So in the sagittal section, okay, let's focus on this area, and that's the corpus callosum. So that's the superhighway, a big area. This area is called the dicephalon. So in the dicephalon, the biggest area is the thalamus. So all this is thalamus. This small triangle is hypothalamus. Control your hormones, your appetite, your body temperature is all controlled here. And this one is the epithalamus, your pineal gland. The most important one is the pineal gland, is around here. It controls your sleep-awake cycle. And also this area you found, okay, there's a small space. Yes, this is your third ventricle. So in the class we talk about in your brain you have 4 different ventricles, and you have cerebrospinal fluid and filled with it. Your 2 lateral ventricles go together to the third ventricle. This is third ventricle. And it will go down to the 4th ventricle. The 4th ventricle is actually between your brainstem and cerebellum. So this is your 4th ventricle. They're all connected together, and will keep going down to your spinal cord. And here are the brain stem structure. I'll leave it to you. Okay, so brain stem is from here to here. Include the midbrain, the pons. Pons is easy because pons protruding out, and medulla oblongata. Okay, so that's the model we have in the lab. So I can use this picture to ask you what's this, what's that. So number 1, that's the corpus callosum, right? And that's the thalamus. And what's this small triangle? This will be the hypothalamus. And also this, if I ask you what ventricle is this? This is actually the 3rd ventricle. And you will go down to the 4th ventricle. That's this one. And where are those 2 lateral ventricles? You have to dig in. So 2 lateral ventricles are inside. And that's your cerebellum. Let's look at cerebellum. Cerebellum is mainly for balancing function. It's part of the motor function. So once the cerebellum been compromised by alcohol, you don't walk straight. So that's for balancing. And this area is the 4th ventricle. That's the cerebellum. And when we take the cerebellum out, it looks like this. So you have 2 hemispheres, the left and right hemisphere. The connecting part, now we cut it open. The connecting part is called the vermis. So the vermis is the connecting part. When we cut it open, inside they have the tree-like structure. So let's look at this, it'll be easier. So this tree is called the tree of wisdom, arbor vitae. So arbor vitae is tree of wisdom. It's those tree structure inside the cerebellum. And the gray part is also called the cortex. Yeah. So that's the cerebellum structure. And here we have 4 different ventricles, 2 lateral ventricles. And we'll go through the interventricular foramen, go to the third ventricle. And the third ventricle, previously we talked about this, about your dicephalon area. And we'll go through the cerebral aqueduct. We'll go to the fourth ventricle. Fourth ventricle is between your cerebellum and your brainstem. And we'll keep going down to your spinal cord. Eventually we'll go down to the spinal cord. Okay, and you also need to be able to identify those cranial nerves. So I took this picture from your book. So these 2 are olfactory bulbs. So when we look at the brain dissection, the sheep's brain, you found, they're going to have huge olfactory bulb. And this nerve is cranial nerve number 1, olfactory nerve. This cranial nerve number 2. So you need to know those big ones. Now, optic. So these 2 are optic. So you have 2 eyeballs around here and here, and it will go through the optic nerve. When they come close together, this area is called optic chiasm. So optic chiasm is usually a landmark, optic chiasm, because when you cut this area, above optic chiasm is hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is a very small triangle. It's actually difficult to find, and right above optic chiasm, and that's hypothalamus. So in anatomy, we usually use it as a landmark. So this is oculomotor, cranial nerve number 3. Let's look at another big one, trigeminal. So this cranial nerve number 5. This will go to your face. Okay, that's it.